So today we're going to be going over all the books I read in 2023. Here we go. We're going to actually do this in reverse order, so we'll start with the books I read in December and make our way over to January. We'll start with The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. This is a historical fiction set in a small town in Pennsylvania that is mostly populated by a black community and a Jewish community. There's a murder and things happen. And I highly recommend this book for anyone who loves historical fiction. I think if you're not super into the genre, the pace will probably be a problem for you. It definitely feels like a slow burn and at times feels like nothing's happening. But I promise you, something's happening. It's giving things all the time. You just gotta, sit in the story a little bit and sit in the historical setting even more. But I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a great way to end my book reading year. I read this book, Fractal Noise by Christopher Paolini. This is a prequel to the book To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, his first sci-fi novel, which I thought was incredible. I read that, I think, back in 2022, maybe 2021. But this was a prequel he released last year that is okay. I think if you enjoy first contact stories, if you really enjoyed the first book, this is definitely worth reading. I just don't think very much happens in it, and so I give it 3 stars. But still worth reading. So after that, we then have Upstream by Mary Oliver. This is collected essays by Mary Oliver, a lot of them regarding kind of nature and life and just noticing things. I think is always the general trend of Mary Oliver's poetry and prose, is that you just look at the world and see it for the beauty that it is. And so reading this book in October was just a great refresher for making sure to stop and pay attention to stuff. I gave this 4 stars. From September to October, I read the books of the Red Rising First Trilogy. Listen to me when I say that these were the craziest books I've ever read. These books were awesome. I was hesitant for some unknown reason to actually start this series, but I am so glad I did. I cannot express enough how badly you need to go read these books. It's sci-fi. What is it? It's space opera. It's survival games. It's spy stuff. It's going undercover. It's space and aliens. And okay, actually, I don't think there's any aliens. They're all humans. But there's just a lot in this story, and the characters are so lovable and hateable, and there's just so much happening all the time, and from beginning to end, this series just swept me off my feet. I am so glad I read it last year, and I'll be able to tell you guys more about the second trilogy whenever I do a recap of this year. I gave Red Rising 4 stars, I gave Golden Sun 5 stars, and I gave Morning Star 5 stars as well. Before that, I read A Thousand Mornings by Mary Oliver. This is a great poetry collection, much of the same themes and tones as the Upstream selected essays I read from the same author. So if you love poetry and you love nature, definitely give that a read. I gave that 4 stars. Before that, I read a book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book is a fiction and one romantic storyline within the fiction, but it's also kind of about these 3 friends who want to make the best video game ever, but life just starts happening. And so it's less about video games, it's less about romance, and it's a lot more about life. And I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. This was a very positive 3 stars. Like if I could have gave this like a 3.8, I definitely would. Prior to that, I read the book The Will of the Many by James Islington. I am a huge James Islington fan, and when I heard about this book, I was so excited to read it. It did not disappoint. This book was awesome. It's got a lot of Roman Empire influence. It's got espionage. It's got double agent stuff. It's got all kinds of action. It's got a really cool power system. It's got some academy life, some slice of life stuff. But it's kind of like the epic fantasy version of Red Rising. And so just you'll see a lot of parallels there, but they're both great stories. I gave this 5 stars out of 5. Before I read that, I read the Jeff Vandermeer series, the Southern Reach trilogy. I actually only read the first 2 books. I still haven't read the third one. I need to go back and do that. But so I read Annihilation and I read Authority. Both of those books were very interesting. If you've seen the movie Annihilation, you kind of understand it's about, the Earth is starting to get taken over by this, like, these plant species. Something is just kind of taking over the Earth, and it's taking over this certain area called the Southern Reach, and people who go in it don't come out, but they keep sending people in it anyways. And so the first book is kind of just the movie. The second book is actually kind of like a thriller investigation movie, as like the people try to find out what the heck is going on at the Southern Reach. So there's one investigator sent down there to do that. I really love these books. I gave them both 5 out of 5 stars and highly recommend people read those if they are into that kind of sci-fi world. Between March and May, I read the Lycanius trilogy by James Islington. What an incredible trilogy. It's what really got me excited about The Will of the Many. This story has so much to offer. Very complex power system that's very fulfilling to learn about. It's got a lot of different character lines that you are equally invested in. I think this is one of those storylines that has a cast of characters who all have their own motivations and plot lines that you're kind of equally invested in. There's not necessarily one main character that you just love and you follow, but there's several that you're highly invested in how things turn out for them, and sometimes those things conflict, and so that is really interesting and some of my favorite things to read in a book. And so this one has the best fantasy story with almost an Attack on Titan like storyline and plot. Things just kind of keep developing, and as you get to the end of the book, you kind of can see the end of the book in the beginning of the book. It's one of those things that you want to go back and reread again, and so highly recommend that. I gave the whole series 5 stars. Sorry. I read a lot of great books this year. Before that, to start the year from January and February, I read a bunch of Kurt Vonnegut. I read The Sirens of Titan, as well as Slaughterhouse-Five. And both of those books were really good. I thoroughly enjoyed them. I think Kurt Vonnegut's very funny. I find myself reading his very absurd stories and having a good laugh while also kind of taking a look at some of the issues with the world. But that was my 2023. It was, to me, a great year. Did you read any of these books? Did you like any of them? Did you hate any of them? Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments.